Wow, it got so quiet all of a sudden. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Coeur d'Alene School District Board meeting for February 5th, 2018. Before we get going here, why don't we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Gentlemen, please remove your hats. Okay, again, welcome and thank you for being here tonight. My name's Casey Morserow, and I'm our board chair, and I'll be directing tonight's meeting. Before we get going here, I'd like to introduce our participants, and I'll start at my far right. First up is Mr. Chris Shipley, our Director of Finance and Operations. Then Ms. Lynn Town, our Clerk of the Board. Dr. Stan Olson, our Superintendent. To my immediate left is Mr. Tom Hearn, our Vice Chair. Ms. Lisa May, Trustee. Ms. Tambra Pickford, Trustee. And Mr. Dave Eubanks, Trustee. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of this meeting. Please sign in on the sheet provided at the entrance door. Because of the diversity of issues, members of the board will not respond to public comment made during tonight's meeting. Instead, issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff person for follow-up. Comments may also be submitted in writing through our clerk. Thank you. I know there's a number of folks here to hear on item K, which is our elementary site selection. The board met in executive session tonight prior to this meeting, and we are going to wait a week on that. You're still welcome to provide us comment during public comment, but we will not be making a decision tonight. I know that was posted that we would be or may be. That will not be happening tonight. So I don't want anyone to stick around for 3 hours thinking we're making a decision and find out that we're not. So I'll probably make that announcement a few times tonight. Okay. Board, we have an addendum to the consent agenda. We're adding item N, which is a travel request for Lake City High School. So is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda with the addendum?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes for meetings on January 8th, January 19th, and January 22nd, 2018?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Town. Okay, board recognition. First, I'd like to call up Mr. Aaron Drake. Good evening, Aaron. Aaron's our vice principal over at Ramsey Magnet School. Good evening.
Good evening, Board Chair Morserow, Superintendent Olson, and members of the board. Thank you for having me tonight. Our 33rd annual 5th grade Martin Luther King celebration. Thank you. Was a success again this year. Thank you to those of you who attended our celebration on January 11th. As it has been tradition, over 900 fifth grade students in our district were charged with the task of writing an essay about Martin Luther King Jr.'s impact on our world today. The focus was to increase students' awareness of the role and impact of Martin Luther King's life on our country. Of all the entries, one student was selected from each building to read their essay at our event, and 2 were chosen for first and second place. I am elated to have them here with us tonight. Our second place winner was Emma Martin from Dalton Elementary School. I encourage you to listen to Emma's message and writing strengths. Her strong vocabulary blew us away. Emma's essay, titled "I Have a Dream," exudes her maturity and intelligence. Please join me in welcoming our second place winner, Emma Martin.
I was having so much fun. It had only been 3 days, but it felt like I had already seen all of Argentina. How were there possibly any more things worth doing, restaurants worth eating at, or sights worth seeing? I decided to go and grab a bite to eat at a cafe. While I was there, I saw a woman standing by a sign marked Shoe Drive. She was collecting shoes for the shoeless children of Argentina, which was almost all of them. When I left the cafe, I started noticing tons of people, especially kids, who had no shoes. I felt badly, and I wanted to do something. But I was on vacation. I had promised myself, no business on vacation. So I took that thought, and I tucked it in the back of my brain. But when I got home, I couldn't keep that thought from coming out. A moment like this planted the seed that grew into the successful business, Tom's. Blake Mykowski is the owner of Tom's Shoes, where change isn't a dream, it's a reality. Blake Mykowski created the shoe business Tom's that benefits Argentinian children who have no shoes. For every pair of shoes sold here in the U.S., Blake donates another pair to a child whose feet are suffering. You may be thinking, children without shoes? I go barefoot all the time. Why is this such a big deal? Well, these children are not barefoot by choice. The small amount of money that their families make must go towards bills and moneylenders. Just imagine having no shoes 24/7, horrible foot pain, bloody cuts with no remedies or bandages, pine needles, pointy rocks. Many children could not even go to school due to having no shoes, and some families with multiple children would have only one pair of small shoes that all the children must share. Blake Mykowski was probably not the first to try to put an end to this, but he was most likely one of the first to succeed, and he couldn't have done it without his generosity and creativity. Blake might be one of the most generous people ever. He's a businessman, and business is not always a very truthful or forgiving industry, but Blake showcases generosity nicely. Did you know that Blake flies out to Argentina to personally deliver shoes? And if you have worked at Tom's for 2 years, Blake shows his gratitude by letting you join him on his next trip to Argentina, and you too get to help deliver shoes. Lots of people thought Blake was the exact opposite of generous because of this thought. Why didn't you just open a charity? Blake says he knows charities help lots of causes, but the cause he was fighting for was so big that a charity just wouldn't help. So he let his creativity step in and opened his successful business, Tom's. Knowing this about Blake, I would happily wear a pair of Tom's any day. Just like Blake Mykowski had a dream that all children will one day have shoes, I have a dream too, a dream that could change the world. My dream is to end child abuse. I shouldn't have to persuade you into thinking that child abuse is wrong. The point is that it is wrong, and it shouldn't be happening. Abuse means to repeatedly hurt someone as punishment, in anger, or simply out of spite. Did you know that 5 to 6 children die every day because of child abuse? And 2 out of those 5 to 6 children are not even old enough to be in kindergarten yet. You may think that child abuse is just an exaggeration and not a big deal, but abuse is 100% illegal. The law states that all adults should care for and protect children, even if they are not their own. One of the saddest things about this is that most of the people abusing these kids are not their mom's friend or their sister's boyfriend, but their parents themselves. Most kids typically don't talk about their experience being abused because they're afraid. These kids need help, and no matter how young or old you are, you can make a difference. It's hard to put yourself in these kids' shoes, and hopefully we'll never end up in them. But that doesn't mean that you can't fight for these kids too, or for any other topic that you believe in. The images of greatness that came before us changed the world, and they have passed that task on to us. So are you going to take on that task and change the world too?
Amazing job, Emma. Thank you. Our first place essayist was Zach Linford from Skyway Elementary School. You might recognize his last name because his brother was one of our top 2 essayists at this time last year. So a lot of good writing in the Linford blood. Zach stood out to us from the competition because of his unique perspective in his essay. We encourage you to listen to Zach's creativity and thoughtfulness as he shares with you this evening. You will be blown away. Please join me in welcoming our first place winner, Zach Linford.
Sitting on my marble throne listening to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. give a courageous speech to thousands of people causes me to reflect on where we have come since the bloody battlefields of the Civil War. His words echo my own words spoken over 100 years earlier, that those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves. Why have people not learned this lesson? Freedom. Everyone there wanted one thing: freedom. From my steps, I heard Dr. King preach a hope for equality, that my 4 children one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I heard the roar of approval for his words and hoped that men had finally realized that all deserve freedom through equality. From where I sit in my memorial overlooking the National Mall, I see progress has been made, but I also see the need for continued improvement. First, people need to be more optimistic rather than pessimistic. This means that when you meet someone or see someone, always think the best of that person. The woman on the street who has a different skin color than you could be the researcher who discovers the cure for cancer. The most ragged beggar could be a decorated veteran who served our country valiantly. Next, have the courage to talk to people who are different than you. Try your best to find things you have in common. When you understand what people believe, it makes it easier to understand their behavior. Also, when you show another person with respect and kindness, they are more likely to treat you with respect and kindness. Finally, make the time and effort to volunteer in your community. When you work beside someone to improve lives, you cannot help but improve relationships as well. As you work towards a common goal, you will see how much better life can be when you work together than when we fight and argue. I will remain a statue for years to come. What changes will I witness? Will this finally be the generation that understands that you are never truly free until everyone is equal? Thank you.
Thank you again to Zach and Emma, and thank you very much for your support of this program over the years. I appreciate it.
Zach and Emma, thank you very much for coming here tonight and sharing your essays with us. We appreciate it. That's always one of the fun events of the district, so great to have you guys here and let you share that with the rest of our patrons. Okay, I'm going to move up front here. If I could, I'm going to call Sal Piazza up. Like we're calling Sal to the principal's office here. So tonight we're pleased to be joined by Sal Piazza, General Manager for Parker Toyota. He's here tonight so we can recognize the support that Parker Toyota has given Coeur d'Alene Public Schools and our students over many years. I have personally known the Parker family and Sal for almost 30 years. And one of the things I've admired most about the Parkers is their desire to give back to the community. They do so not for publicity or for a marketing gimmick, but because they feel it's the right thing to do. It's their way to say thank you to our community. Tonight, we'd like to recognize their support of our district, but I would be remiss to not at least acknowledge their generosity exceeds well beyond us to dozens of organizations and projects around our community. The Parker's contributions are too numerous to name, but here are just some of the ways Parker has partnered with the school district to motivate and assist our students and to help ensure the successful student activities. Since 2005, Parker Toyota has sponsored the Perfect Attendance Spells Success Program, where over 1,000 fifth graders in the Coeur d'Alene School District have seen their perfect attendance reward them with new bicycles and helmets. Each year, these bikes and helmets are hand-delivered by Parker staff members to the schools and awarded to the children in an assembly. Parker's also been a strong advocate for our early childhood literacy efforts, with their support of the Learning with Lucky Reading Incentive Program for first graders. Each student was supplied a reading buddy, a stuffed black or yellow puppy, and the opportunity to earn gifts for their stuffed friend by completing reading tasks. Additionally, Parker is and has been a major supporter of the Excel Foundation's big event. This annual fundraiser provides teacher grants for our classrooms. Parker has been a diamond sponsor of the big event, which is the highest level of support. And last but certainly not least, for the past 14 years, Parker has donated a new car or truck for our Fight for the Fish Spirit Basketball Game Vehicle Raffle. Every dollar from ticket sales benefits student organizations at Coeur d'Alene High and Lake City High School. In the giveaway of a 2018 Toyota CHR at last month's Fight for the Fish, our students raised almost $120,000. This money enriches programs such as tennis, soccer, swimming, yearbook, debate, dance, art, French club, cheer, student leaderships, and many more. This year, I was astounded to learn that the 14-year cumulative ticket sales have surpassed more than $1.3 million. This fund has directly benefited student teams, clubs, and extracurricular activities. It's an extraordinary amount of financial support from our community, and it wouldn't have happened without the substantial gifts year after year from the Parkers. So, for caring so deeply about the well-being of our schools and students, we thank you and we present you our Champion of Children's Award for outstanding support in enhancing student opportunities and advancing the mission of the school district. Please join me in expressing our gratitude.
Thank you for the support, but we truly love what we do and love giving the money to support the kids in our community. That's how we spend our advertising money. And thank you to all the volunteers in this room who give their time generously back to our kids also. So it's not just about us, it's about everybody in the community. But thank you very much for your support.
Hi, everybody. We should have some interesting visuals up. There we go. Hey, among the most valuable assets any child can have is a good teacher. But when a teacher is beyond good, when a teacher is simply amazing, magical things happen with kids in a classroom and learning soars. Each school month in our district, together with the Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership and Panhandle Kiwanis, we honor 3 such amazing educators who do magical things with kids in our classrooms, usually every day. And our first Invest, Inspire, and Innovate Award winner is from Bryan Elementary School. She is a fantastic art teacher, and her name is Deb Loy Lind. And I've been in her room multiple times, and I always come away really impressed. Okay?
Our next Invest, Inspire, and Innovate Award comes to us from Canfield Middle School, and that's Mrs. Katie Pemberton, and she is a math teacher there.
And now we have Shelley Blank from Lake City High School, a reading teacher, just a phenomenal educator in every way, deeply loved and respected at Lake City.
And our Shining Star Employee of the Month is Jake Nelke, who is a computer technician and in the technology department. So congratulations.
Yeah, can we have a round of applause for all of these wonderful people?
Okay, thank you, Trustee Pickford and Trustee Eubanks. Time for our high school student body reports, and I'll start with Coeur d'Alene High School tonight.
Hello, I am Sarah Smith, an ASB officer at Coeur d'Alene High School. Next to me is Abby Schrantz, Rachel Dooley, and Emily Clater. Thank you for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. The past month, CHS students have been busy studying for and taking finals. At CHS, we had block schedule for the 2 testing days with only 3 classes a day and school until 1:30. From 1:30 to 2:30 was time for students to get help, make up tests, and finish their finals. Seniors are now done with their senior papers and are completing their project hours for their senior project. Right after the last board meeting in January was Fight for the Fish. It was a huge success. CHS students had a fantastic time and there was a great turnout. And of course, both schools donated $500 to the Human Rights Task Force. An exciting event that took place this month were the superintendent interviews at Lake City High School. 10 students from CHS were chosen to attend the interviews last week. We want to thank the school board for allowing us to play a role in choosing the new superintendent. We would also like to thank Mrs. Clifford for facilitating the interviews and making us all feel welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. How about Venture High School? Good evening. Thank you for being here.
Good evening to you all. My name is Kayla McKinnon. Also with me is Alex. We represent the career technical education classes at Venture High School. Venture continues to be busy with learning projects and activities. Highlights for the last month and upcoming activities include the following. Standardized testing season is up and coming. Our students are focusing on the preparations for the SAT, work readiness assessment, and technical skills assessments. The leadership class is continuing to work with Kelsey McCall of the Panhandle Health District to help make positive changes to make use of the services more teen-friendly. A field trip to the health district is pending for the end of the month. Cope to Thrive class, funded by the Excel Foundation, is going well. 10 students are learning life essential skills each Wednesday after school for 10 weeks. In addition, other staff members have attained their certification and will be implementing the program to other students this spring. Our new extended learning time on Friday gives our students more one-on-one time with teachers. The extra hour per week helps students complete their work. Thank you for all your support of our school. We do appreciate all of you do to help us well-educated, responsible community members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for being here. Lake City High School. Good evening.
Good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, Superintendent Olson, and district administration. My name is Taylor Pickford, and I'm the ASB secretary at Lake City High School. Also with me tonight is our vice president, Kira Simpson, and treasurer, Peyton Barber. Our president, Valerie Lagososa, is sick and couldn't be here tonight. Last month was Fight for the Fish, and we are proud to have won the fish for the 8th year in a row. We would also like to take this opportunity to recognize the months of effort and planning put in by our student council, as well as the support and encouragement given to us by our teachers, administrators, secretaries, custodians, and lunch ladies. Our entire building came together to make that event a success, and the spirit and energy shown by our incredible student body was the icing on the cake. We could not be prouder of our Lake City family, and we wanted to publicly acknowledge everyone's work and that contributed to this victory. This month is, as usual, is busy at Lake City. This last weekend, we had our first ever Sadie Hawkins dance, which was an absolute success. Our junior class created amazing decorations, and our huge crowd had a blast. We also have our basketball teams preparing for districts over the next few weeks, and our theater students are preparing for the opening of The Importance of Being Earnest on February 8th. The show is a trivial comedy for serious people and runs the weekends of February 8th, 9th, and 10th, and the 15th, 16th, and 17th. Our students were also invited to be a part of the superintendent panels last week, and we wanted to thank the board for including them in the selection process. The panels were fascinating, and we are pleased and grateful to have our input considered. Our student council is also heading to the State Student Council Conference at the end of the month, and our ASB officers have been asked to present a breakout session on Fight for the Fish. We're looking forward to collaborating with our fellow student councils from around the state and bringing back some great ideas about school events and leadership. This month, we will also be starting preparations for the SAT test on April 10th by handing back PSAT results and going over what those results mean with our students. As we get closer to the test, we'll be making test prep plans for the students that include using resources like Khan Academy, Albert, and others to make sure our students are as confident and prepared as possible. Our college and career advisor is going to middle schools in the next couple weeks to work on 4-year plans with 8th graders, and several hundred students are getting ready to register for the AP exams next week. In addition, our school has been selected to go through the State School Safety and Vulnerability Inspection on February 12th and 14th. This inspection includes a written assessment and building physical inspection, and we're looking forward to being involved. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight, and we'll see you again next month.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pickford. And is anyone from K-Tech here tonight? Okay. So, Mr. Twitchell, that means you're up, sir, with the Coeur d'Alene Education Association report. Good evening. Looking good tonight.
Hey, I try. I'll tell you, though, after those speeches by those grade school students, I just want to rip this up, and because holy smokes, that was amazing. I have my master's, and I can't even write that well. Board members, Superintendent Olson, district employees, once again, I'd like to thank you for being here. You know, I've been seeing some news stories about how some districts across the country are kind of dealing with prayer in school. But I'll tell you, as long as we continue having tests in school, there will be prayer in school. So, all right. We've had a lot happening since the last time we've met. First off, North Idaho should be very proud with Jerry Kramer finally being inducted into the Football Hall of Fame. He definitely serves North Idaho proud, and it's something that's been long overdue. We've had the opportunity to meet and learn about the school budget with the forum that was put on by that, and a huge thank you to everybody, Mr. Shipley and everybody else that helped you with that. It was absolutely fantastic presentation, and my hat definitely goes off to everybody that has to try to tame that beast that is the budget. I know I would not want to be in your shoes for that. A lot of things came up in that, and probably the biggest thing, though, that came up was the mention that we are running on a very tight budget. Along those lines, I would just like to ask that anytime we look to hire a new position, that we really look at how that will relate to student achievement. Is there direct connection to student achievement? And if there's not, then perhaps we put off that hire for a little while until the state of Idaho gets their stuff together and starts funding us properly, which maybe never, but we can always hope and pray, I guess. Speaking of money, we also have the opportunity to have our first training for the interest-based bargaining. Or was that 2 times ago? Now I'm questioning myself. It all blends together, huh? It was since the last time? Okay, so we're good, okay. Like all of a sudden I questioned myself on that. Like I said, there's just been so much happening. That was absolutely fantastic, and I can tell you that the CEA is really looking forward to it. As discussed, I think there's things on both sides that we're going to have to work through, and hopefully the next training we have, we can address that. But I know that we're really looking forward to the second training, and then hopefully we can get started sooner than later. I think it's going to be a win-win for everybody in the district and the community. And so, once again, thank you for initiating that and helping us get going on the interest-based bargaining. Lastly, of course, we really look forward to Dr. Cook coming and him taking the helm in School District 271. We're excited to be working with Dr. Cook. The change always brings a bit of hesitance, the fact of the unknown, as well as a bit of excitement to new and exciting possibilities. And the CEA looks forward to building a solid relationship with Dr. Cook and, of course, continuing the solid relationship with everybody here. So, thank you.
Okay, as I mentioned previously, we were scheduled to make a decision, or at least we were noticed for action, on the elementary site selection. And as I mentioned earlier, we have postponed that, at least making that decision for 1 week. but you're still welcome to address that during public comment if you'd like. So, we're at our public comment time. I'd like to remind the public that while this is a meeting of the Board of Trustees that takes place in public, it is not a meeting with the public. It is a meeting of the board to conduct district business. The board does allow some limited public comment on district-related items. Those wishing to address the board should sign up on the sheet provided at the back. Public comment will be limited to one item, not to exceed 3 minutes. If you have additional comments that you'd like to present to the board, you may provide those comments in writing to the clerk of the board, Ms. Lynn Town. Ms. Town will ensure that the board members receive this additional commentary. Please keep in mind that board members will not respond to public comment. If I determine that an individual statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, or repetitive, I may terminate that speaker's privilege to address the board. Okay, looks like we have 2 people signed up tonight. Brianne Weinberger, welcome. And if you'll just make sure the light's on the mic there, please. Thank you.
It was. Okay. Dear Chairperson Casey Morris, I knew I would say it wrong. I apologize. Superintendent Dr. Stan Olson and members of the board, my name is Brianne Weinberger. I am the Title and Advanced Learning Program teacher at Northwest Expedition Academy. I'm a mom to a 10-month-old and a 2-year-old. My husband had foot surgery, just a little background, so he can't lift kids up. So this is where my future is. But it's pertinent because I live in the Skyway School District, and I'm talking about how the schools are growing. So I actually have 2 children that are going to be attending our growing community school right now. And so basically I'm here on behalf of the staff of NEXA, and we came together and we've been really immersed in this conversation, just as many people have, since the board and the community passed the wonderful bond that said, yes, we are growing, yes, we are going to fund new schools. And we're excited about those new schools that are going to be funded. And the biggest question is, where, when, how can we help? And so I know that the board has received many opinions about the location and the process of the new school. And I think the biggest thing that our staff wants to make sure is that as personal individuals, we have our voice, but as a staff, no matter where the school gets built, we are going to continue our unwavering support for cultivating and growing the students' minds in our unique project-based learning environment. And we're excited to make that next step happen. And we're doing all we can do with what we have now, and it's amazing work. And you're always welcome to come by, and we'll be excited to show you where we're gonna grow once that decision's made. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next up is Matthew Holton. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. I've never spoken at a public meeting, so I apologize that I don't know the nuances of how to greet you guys, but I do appreciate your taking the time to listen to us. My name is Matthew Holton. I'm a Hayden resident. We have a couple boys who are in elementary school. Last year we started off at Hayden Meadows in the craziness and the overpopulation, and this year we've been able to have one of our children attend NEXA. We've just had a wonderful experience. We understand that you guys are trying to make things work for the district, and we appreciate all the work that you have done. Our kid has flourished and blossomed at NEXA. He's received a lot of special attention that he's been needing, and we've just had a wonderful, wonderful experience. We want to thank you and the NEXA staff for making that possible for us and many, many other families. We've been made aware that there could be a change in location, building of a new site, procurement of new land even for this. And just as a local resident and parent of kids, while I recognize and understand that there is much, much more work and insight and nuances to the situation than I myself am privy to, and that's fine, I would just love to lend my voice to those who would urge you to consider building on the current location that NEXA is at the old Hayden Meadows Elementary, or the Hayden Elementary building. We love having our children attend in the heart of Hayden in the downtown area. It's just a wonderful part of the small town community feel. We love that it's close. We love that the school is expeditionary and that the location lends itself well to that. And so we would just hope that you guys would hopefully listen to the voices of us, parents and staff, who are urging you guys to try to make things work. We recognize that it does add some particularly interesting problems when it comes to building on site with a school that's already existing, but we would love it if you guys would consider that. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Holton. No need to formally address us. You did just perfect there. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Olson, you are up, sir.
3 quick reports tonight. Number one, as Bruce had mentioned and gave his thanks to the Board of Trustees for the interest-based bargaining first step, we in turn would like to thank Bruce Twitchell and Scott Travers for the leadership that they've shown in moving this process forward. For those of you that are not familiar with interest-based bargaining, it is a little bit different approach to the bargaining and problem discussion process between representatives of the teachers and the school board and staff. It is a process that requires trust and relationship and deep knowledge of all of the functions of the district, and that the focus is on identifying common interests and common opportunities to, first of all, serve the students of this district, but secondly, to find efficient and effective ways to deliver instruction. We got off to a very, very good start. Was that last week or the week before last already? It's, yes. With representatives of the association and the staff and the board. Our second round of this process will be March 13th, and we're looking for a deeper dive into the general process of interest-based bargaining, and then beginning to focus on specific issues or specific problems that we can delve into and address cooperatively. This is not to say that previous bargaining experiences in the district were negative or poor or ill-conceived. That's not the truth at all. This is a different process, and it's what I would call retooling to focus on, again, a more hopefully efficient and ultimately effective way to come to closure on key issues that affect all of us and most importantly affect our children. So that next meeting is March 13th. Just a comment about the data summit. For those of you that have gone through the 12-plus hours of data review in Summit 1 and number 2, we have, because we have some schedule conflicts with board and key players, we're going to move the Data Summit 3.0 from the scheduled February 21st to March 9th. So we would ask people to take a look at their calendars and make that adjustment along the way, and we'll move forward with the agenda. The purpose of the third meeting will be to add any new performance reports that have become available to the district, and there are several since we did our last session. And then secondly, to produce a summary of what we've talked about, conclusions and recommendations. This relates to not only the work we've been doing now, but helping to set the table for the incoming superintendency and the team that exists in this room and in this community to work with the new superintendent and, of course, the board in moving this district forward. There's been great work done in this data summit process, and we think it'll have a tremendous impact on the next steps and stages of development of the district. Item last is our board workshop. Again, my thanks to Katie, Chris, Kelly, the primary staff members who delivered the budget workshop. It's probably been a while since we've done a deep examination of our budget. The good news is we're in good hands with the budget process. The challenge is we live relatively close to the margin, not out of anyone's fault in this district, but out of basically the way schools are funded in Idaho, in particular the way it shakes out in Coeur d'Alene. We have a lot of work to do, but rest assured, we have the people in place, the leadership at the board level, and the support of this community to make that budget work for our children and our staff. And it'll move forward effectively. But I appreciate very much the work that was done here, and you'll be receiving information both directly and through media sources on the follow-up for that process. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Olson. Board of Trustee comments, are there any? There's no one down. Okay, we'll move along.
I just wonder why you're all looking at me.
Okay, so we are at number 10 here, which is approval of the consent agenda. And remember, we added a letter N. So is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda as presented, items A through N? Can we motion and get a second? Or is your question about that? Yeah. So let's motion, get a second, then we'll have discussion.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right, thank you. So it's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes, my question's for Brian. I think he's probably still out there. I was looking at the Fernan bid, and it said no alternate projects will be done at this time. I didn't know if there was money left if we were going to do alternate projects and what they might include. Or maybe Chris would have an update for us. The parking lot at Fernan.
I'm not sure about the Fernan parking lot of the alternate projects.
I know there.
Yeah, I might be able to speak to it just because I was at the bid opening. So I think there were 3 or 4 alternates that went beyond the reconstruction of the parking lot there. And I can't tell you exactly what was in them. I think one was some landscaping, and then there were some parking lot overlays, so repaving of some of the existing parking lot. The way the bids came in, basically there was enough money to cover the reconstruction process and the splitting school buses away from the schools, but no, at this time, no other funding.
Okay. It looked like there was maybe a little bit of contingency money left. So I didn't know if they would finish it and then come back to like maybe the landscaping, if there's.
I think they talked about that at the bid opening, but they want to get everything done first.
My next question is, and I saw there was notes on it, on the MOU for Heritage Health, will Venture High School students only be able to access care, or will it be for like a Coeur d'Alene High School student if he knows it's there and he wants to, or she wants to get care?
Sure. I think it said Venture only at this time.
It
Is
did,
that
and I was
correct?
wondering if there's.
Yes, the MOU is for Venture only, and we do have the principal here, Teresa Kaiser, and the nurse Connie Drager, who wrote the proposal.
Yeah, it was really nice.
So it'd be nice to, would you guys, ladies like to talk a little bit about it?
Good evening. My name is Connie Drager, and I'm the nurse at Venture, and this is Teresa Kaiser, and she is our principal. I have a little thing I wrote up about what we're asking for. Venture High School is serving students who have been unsuccessful in the traditional classroom setting. Many of our students are affected by adverse life events that affect their overall health and ability to succeed in school. They deal with issues such as poverty, incarcerated family members, homelessness, past abuse, neglect, and have physical and mental health diagnoses. Many are working and living on their own. Accessing health care is difficult. As a result, students have untreated physical and mental health needs. Parents and students lose income and students miss school when they take time to go to the doctor. This is true for many students in our district, not just Venture High School students. I am at Venture 20 hours a week on a Healthy Schools grant from the State Department of Education. Not long after increasing my hours at Venture, I began to notice a steady influx of students with anxiety, depression, health concerns related to stress in their lives. Hence, we got the grant for the COPE program. I have found that access to care is an ongoing problem, and making Heritage Health easily accessible to students would help break down this barrier. The school-based health center from Heritage Health is available to provide physical and mental health care for students at Venture 1 day a week. It is a mobile unit, a bus, that's staffed by a family nurse practitioner and mental health and medical assistant. Acute care, such as testing for strep throat, influenza, mono, urinary tract infections, colds, ear infections, injuries, and physicals can be delivered with parental consent. Counseling may be available in the future depending on the number of students that need to access these services. Chronic absenteeism is a public health issue that can lead to a lifetime of health problems. Reducing absenteeism by just as little as 1 day can help improve academic performance. Having Heritage Health accessible to our students is a start to fixing this problem. It is not our goal in any way to take away any student from any provider in the community. A release has to be obtained from a primary care provider if the visit is deemed non-acute, per Idaho state regulation. Services would be charged to patients' insurance, although no student will be turned away due to inability to pay.
So just to answer your specific question about whether or not care could be available for other students, at this point we really requested it for Venture, although I don't know that that isn't something that couldn't happen in the future.
I was only asking because I think it's an amazing proposal, and I would love to see our other schools have access to this sort of care, and maybe it's great to start with Venture. I think the population is a great choice for a start, but yeah, if it's successful, it would be great to see all of our high schools have access.
Thank you, and I think Connie made a really good point when she said that even though we have a high percentage of students with medical needs at Venture, that's true for really all of our schools. So.
There are more than 2,000 school-based health centers in the country.
I just want to thank you for your efforts. I know you've been very sensitive to this population. I know this population is at risk. These kids have had some tough times. Many have had tough times. I know we've talked about some of this. I've been to your school. I want to thank you for this. I think this is excellent. I wish you could be there more than, or Heritage could be there more than 1 day a week, or maybe make it to the other schools too. But this is a great start, and thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And I've been researching alternative school programs around the country, and I have to say I am so grateful for the support that we get from Coeur d'Alene School District. Our kids are so, so fortunate to have you behind them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And they're even more fortunate to have you behind them. Thank you.
Okay. So there was a motion and it was seconded. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries, Ms. Town. Okay. Item A is a superintendent search update, and I'll start on this, I think. And then if we want to chime in, and then we'll get to the kind of the motion there. So if you haven't heard, we've held a superintendent search, and this process has been going on really over the past 8 months. It kind of came to a close last week with a hellacious schedule that we all endured. First off, I'd like to thank Ms. Town. I think the board would like to thank Ms. Town just for putting this all together and really pulling it off without a hitch. So if we could thank Ms. Town. Okay, secondly, I'd like to thank the community members, our staff, our both classified and certified folks that served on interview teams. We had 22 students representing the 3 high schools, which was excellent. They really provided some great insight, had some tough questions for the candidates, so that was a lot of fun to see. And then our community partners, Coeur d'Alene Education Partnership and RISE, who both helped facilitate our community event at the Coeur d'Alene Public Library. And each night we had 60 to 70-ish patrons that attended, so we were really thrilled with the turnout. As you know, I guess we released it earlier today. So the board had selected Dr. Stephen Cook to serve as superintendent of the Coeur d'Alene School District. And before we go into a motion, does anyone else want to add anything?
Well, I also want to echo some of comments you made about the participation of the community. I was also thinking about the meeting down at the Chamber of Commerce with the business leaders. They took 3 lunch hours, I guess it was, to meet with all of the candidates, and these are people who are busy schedules, and they committed themselves to doing that, and that was great. And I thank the people that were the finalists, and it was a tough selection, but I think I just feel good about we're moving forward. It was a very busy week, but it was a very productive week, and I think we can move forward. And I just want to thank the participation inside the district and outside the district.
Okay, everyone's quiet tonight. Okay, so I have a motion here that I will go ahead and read. So there's a motion to approve the hiring of Dr. Stephen Cook as superintendent of Coeur d'Alene School District and execute a contract and addendum to employ Dr. Cook effective July 1st, 2018 for a period of 3 years.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm just going to add a little discussion there in case anyone's wondering why a period of 3 years. Under Idaho law, that's the max contract that a school district can offer a superintendent. So, okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries unanimously, Ms. Town. And we will be welcoming Dr. Cook to our district. He should be visiting us hopefully frequently, but at least a few times between now and July 1st. And I hope you all get a chance to meet him soon. Okay, item B is a capital construction update. Mr. Shipley.
Thank you. If I could just make one programming note, I think it'll make sense if I could just do the finance report first. It'll flow into, and it's actually how our program is, the paperwork in your packet is organized also. So with the finance report, and what I really want to get to tonight is I want to focus a little more on the enrollment. So if I want to follow along where you guys are, and I'm starting off, this is at page 84 with this budget status report. And really going through this, a little bit more of the same, if you will. As you know, during our budget seminar, the school district really tracks year to year, pretty similar from month to month and from year to year. And flipping that next page over, what I wanted to point out, and during our discussion, we had some discussions about transfers. And so if you were to look on the bottom of the page, you'll see there transfers to other funds. And you notice that there is no action, nothing has happened. Those transfers typically take place at the end of the fiscal year. That's when those are done. So we haven't missed anything. There's nothing that we haven't done yet. Those are planned to be done, but just wanted to take the time now to point that out to you. If we can go to our next page, and this is the information. This is the same information given in graphical form, same way that you've had it in board meetings past. And of course, you can see transfers out, just that little bar. And again, just pointing to the fact that's done at the end of the year. There we go. And what I wanted to do, this is our enrollment report, and we're at 10,797 students. Our actual fall enrollment was 10,808, and what I've done is I went back and long-range planning had some models out there modeling out what our enrollment actually would be. And then so I went in and looked at what was the best fit model. And none were perfect because they are estimates. But I did find one that was fairly close. It was the cohort linear K. Don't worry about that. And what I wanted to tell you, though, is that over our next 3 years, We have enrollment growth that will be somewhere about 358. Yeah, I was surprised to see that. So just to kind of put that into context, and I know everybody here is aware that our district is growing, and so just to put that into a perspective, that's a small elementary school or a good mid-sized one.
What's that number, Chris?
358. Yes.
Chris, I know you work on numbers and you're constantly projecting enrollments. So what number will you use when you start to work on the budget? Will this be a number that you think about down the road, or will you use a different model? Or
So for budgeting, that would be a different model. This is enrollment, and this is far out. So this would be more strategic, and then the budget, average daily attendance. So it's close, but not the same one.
Can I ask a question, Chris?
Yes, please.
What is the basis for that projection? Is somebody just looking at houses and dividing by so many? Or
Well,
is
there's
there something
actually,
more?
in long-range planning, there were 5 models that were used. This was a professional firm. I forget the name. I apologize.
Construction Services Group, and it was done in 2015.
Thank you. So there was a simple percentage growth, linear regression, cohort survivability, natality, which would also include natural births using Census data, and the one that was, and student per housing unit was another methodology that was used. And there were some variants within each of those estimates used, but now that we have a few years gone by, I thought, hey, now would be a good time to go and take a look at that. So again, just wanted to, reinforce the obvious knowledge that we are growing, and within 3 years, I think that's a pretty safe number to hold on to, 358.
But just a little history here so we don't get too
Sure.
wedded to this.
Yeah.
We've had years in the recent past, where the budget projection for the following year was going to be 2 kids, and it came in at 267. And then other years it was a budget an enrollment projection of 170 growth, and it came in at 37. So it can be pretty scattered.
Yeah, there's a confidence interval there, of course, absolutely. Well said.
All right.
Chris, let me just translate a couple of things that you said here. General cohort survival studies start with birth rate statistics for the community. We go to the birthing centers for the community, which I consider probably the Kootenai Health Center is the primary. We take a look at the birth total for a particular year, and then 5 years later, back in history, as we take a look at number of live births, percent of youngsters from that live birth cohort who entered the school district, and that's looked at historically. The second level of this is, and it's kind of harsh language, but it basically means how students move through the district. It's the survivability, not related to health or well-being, but the survivability of that original cohort as it moves through the district. So let's say that group 5 years out, 1,000 kids, X percent comes into the district, starts kindergarten. We take a look at the kindergarten experience, and historically, what percent of those youngsters move from the kindergarten experience to first grade in the district? Generally speaking, at those levels, it's over 100%. And it's not that kids are replicating themselves. What basically happens is people move into the district unevenly at different grades and bring their children. So you'll generally see 105 to 110% of youngsters in kindergarten move to the first grade, and then from the first grade to the second grade, and second grade to the third, and there's a percentage tied to each of those. Over time, there's a pretty solid, and Chris alluded to this, there's a pretty solid predictiveness to the number of youngsters that will sustain in the system and move through the whole K-12. And our survivability is quite high, but there's a different percentage for every group, and it's looked at historically. It's not a perfect way, and Mike has had some good success in using not only a conservative cohort survival, but also, for Stan Olson's sake, a liberal cohort survival, and then something in the middle. And then basically exacting kind of a general standard for that. But it makes a nice difference in, again, predicting numbers, predicting sustainability in grades, and how to deploy students into grade groups, schools, and across the district. So it's a handy piece, but it's one of several pieces that we use.
Thank you. Which leads us into construction update. We had the bid for Lake City High School that came in, and I think if you'd like to, please scroll to page, and on yours it'd be 80. On mine it's 89 here. It's on the second page. One more, John, and one more. That's kind of hard to see, but if you see it in your packet there, that general contract for Lake City High School, we came right in. So we did some engineering with the engineers, architects, builders, and also with the school. And we came right in at $5,444,000. We have some contingency there also. If you see that, that's at $457,000. So our contingency as a percentage there, we're good. That's at 8.4%. So what that means is that we were able to come in on that project as budgeted, and we didn't have to give away any of our contingency here at the beginning. So cross our fingers, knock on wood, that nothing scary happens, right? Okay. So the next bid coming up is going to be for the Coeur d'Alene High School. And what we've done there is that there was subcontractors that needed some more time, so that bid date got pushed. See on the calendar, it got pushed to the right, got put ahead a week. So that bid date is going to be, let me look and read it, so on the 14th, February 14th. So I'm sure those contractors' wives are extremely happy. That is the next date for Coeur d'Alene High School, and that's at 5 o'clock at our district office for that opening. And then again, I just want to, and every time I have a chance to talk with you and anybody who here is listening, just how powerful these two pieces of paper are. It matches our budget, and this comes directly from our accounting system. So there's no separate spreadsheets being taken. There's no separate, hey, I got my budget, we're good, and we don't double up on budgets. So don't let two pieces of paper diminish how important and how much control these actually have as far as monitoring the progress we have with our construction projects going through for the 2017 bond projects. It's a powerful tool, simple but very powerful, very effective. If there's any questions on those, I'll take those. If not, that's my construction update. And of course, once we start the actual groundbreaking, they're going to do what they can do on the outsides. And then of course, once school is out and the kids are away, they're going to be going gangbusters.
Did you mention Lakes Middle School too? In that?
Yeah, Lakes Middle School, their bid opening day, I assume you're asking. If
Yes.
not, I'll tell you. It's March 7th, and that's March 7th, 2018, also at the district office, and I believe also at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And then Dalton, just to round this out, that's going to be February 2018, also at 5 o'clock at our district office.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Shipley on either one of those items? All right, so let's move on to item D, which is policy for information. We have two policies here, and we're going to start with 1250P, which is Board of Trustees committees, and I believe Ms. Town had come across a few things on here that were just kind of out of sync and needed some updating. Is that correct, Ms. Town?
That is correct. It started with a question that came up about ad hoc committees and the chair of said ad hoc committees being members of the community members on those committees. So that prompted me to pull the procedure, take a look, and I was part of the subgroup in 2013 that wrote these procedures to begin with. So felt like I had a little part in writing it, so it was time to clear up some things that seemed to be a little unclear. So just quickly on page 91, what was item number 2, it says the board shall state what resources it will provide to the committee. And really, I think that can be taken out depending on the task of the committee. Those resources are provided by the administrator who is heading that up. So that could be ELA materials, novels, textbooks, that sort of thing. So really it does fall back to the administrator and not so much to the board. So that, if we could strike that. On item 3, it said the board must establish the size of the committee, and I'm recommending the administration may recommend the size of the committee. The board ultimately seats the committee once the applications have been received by those folks in the community who are interested. We do have a goal of a minimum of 25% community members. It's always higher than 25%. It's usually closer to 50%. And the board does ultimately confirm the membership list. What is currently on number 4, and this was kind of where we got started, the committee, once formed and confirmed by the board, will select its own chair from community. And so I would propose that we change that word to may select. A member of the community may not feel comfortable stepping up to chair an ad hoc committee. We always hope that they will, but in the event that they don't, then it's no longer mandated if we change it from will to may. And then finally, on page 92, what was item number 9? This just makes it a little bit more clear. The final report will be approved and forwarded by the committee members as opposed to signed off. Just seemed to read a little better.
Okay. Any questions for this, or for Ms. Town on this?
Lynn, I have a question on 10. Following the presentation of the draft report for information, should there be public input or comment, the board will refer all patrons wishing to make comments to the committee chair. I didn't know if that was necessary. If it's the draft proposal and we have citizens who still want to comment, shouldn't we allow comment until the final report is issued? So can we just strike it out entirely? Or?
I would ask my colleagues what their thoughts are to strike it.
I mean, we don't have to. I just was curious in the thought process behind that, since it's the draft proposal, and I get the part about once the final recommendation is given, but...
And we do always take comment, public comment. There's always...
But I think further down, if I recall, it says something, once it's been presented to the board and accepted, there is no public comment.
Yeah.
I think, right?
Not the two kind of, I didn't think we needed both. I think the last one's fine, but after the draft, I think we should allow people to speak the following board meeting if they want to.
And absolutely, to Chair Morris-Rowe, Superintendent Olson, and members of the board, we always encourage public comment. In fact, you'll see that a little bit later today. The most important decision that you will ever make can't be made in a vacuum. So really, it's going to be up to you as to who is the best recipient of that. Part of that number 7 is that they, or was it number 4, excuse me, they shall identify a chair. The intent of that chair was to be a little bit of a filter before that information gets back to you. If you choose to strike that or make it more broad, that it will change from a will to a may, then that will probably be directed more to you. But ultimately, yes, comment needs to be part of that conversation.
I'm okay striking the may have a chair if there's not a committee member that wants to fill that role. Then we're following policy at least.
How about a will attempt? Because I think I'm guessing that was probably put in there just to try to have it be a community member. I understand with the math, I think it was the math committee, we didn't have that opportunity. So can we will attempt?
Will attempt to select. That makes sense to me.
So at least that's the intention that we would hope to have it be a community member, but if not, we don't have to. Ms. Town, on number 2, where it's talking about resources, was that talking about resources in terms of dollars? Like the board will, because I know the answer is no.
There have never
or
been
none.
dollar resources allocated to give to an ad hoc committee to do their work. I honestly don't know how that line, except that it was part of the ISBA model policy at the time.
Right. The one that I can think of, or one example, I guess, would be back when I was on long-range planning, and I believe at that time Superintendent Handelman brought something forward to the board to be approved for the CSG group to do things.
And I think that would still apply even without this language. This to me reads that as committees are being formed, that the board then, in addition to stating the task, will state what resources will be provided, and that's out of the board's sandbox to know what resources, and I'm thinking in terms of materials and supplies and those kinds of things. So that's what made sense to me.
My only concern about the committees is that we have clear work plans for them, clear goals and that are set for them. Sometimes to me, it's not clear to me is that what some of these boards or these committees are actually working on. I just would like clarification on that for some.
There should be verbiage in here that the task is set, and when in July, when these standing committees, for example, when we bring those committee members to you to appoint them as a standing committee for the year, the task is listed on the summary.
Okay, I just think, for instance, we need to have clear direction for some committees. I'm thinking, for instance, long-range planning. What are they working on? What should they be working on? I'd like us to be real clear about that. I'm not sure we've been real clear about our direction to them about what they should be working on now that the bond is passed, et cetera.
We certainly make that attempt to delineate what the task will be.
And I can speak to that, Tom. The bylaws for long-range planning are set, and so their direction has been functioning now for like 18 years. So if you go back and look at the board policy, you'll find their direction. And they're just, in my opinion, very clear on to what they're doing. And when I give update today, I can tell you what we're working on now. But
well, they are a standing committee, and I think we need to review what they're doing sometimes. And they're a board-appointed committee.
We do.
Yep. So, yeah, they're a little unique in that they have bylaws, and the bylaws fairly well map out kind of what they're supposed to be doing. That's certainly something we could look at.
I think an annual redirection is important.
Sure. Remember, we threw them off course, I would say, a little bit by asking them to look at our property and where we were a few months ago and to provide us some feedback. So that certainly sidetracked them and took them away from what I think Lisa will update us later on what they're working on. First line of this, Tom, does say that standing committees of the board may be created and their purpose defined by a majority of the board. I really like the second sentence, which says the board chair shall appoint trustees to serve on such committees. We haven't done it that way, so I like that.
It's been voluntary up to now.
That's right. Behave or you get put on the hard ones. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So are we removing 10? Are we comfortable with that? Or I would like to see the community be able to give input up until the final draft is presented.
Yeah, can we look at that? This is just for comment at this point, or this is for info,
It's
correct?
procedure.
So we don't have to, it won't be coming back next month?
It would not necessarily be coming back. We wouldn't put this out for public comment because it is just an internal procedure.
Can we just maybe continue to look at 10 instead of doing it right now? But I'm just worried, is that taking out any public comment opportunity? I mean, there's always public comment at
I think this is saying the public comment then has to go to the committee chair versus them being able to come here. Yeah, so it's giving more opportunity for public comment.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
So you want to strike number 10? Is that what I heard?
Are we okay with that? Okay.
All right.
That's what it sounds like.
Thank you.
Okay. This next one ought to go quick. This is personal electronic devices. This is the procedure portion, not to be confused with the policy, which we'll be looking at later for action. And just a reminder, these were both procedures which don't always come to the board, but the one because it was with board committees, and now this one because it's been something we've talked about a lot over the last few months. And it's a complete rewrite and an important issue that is before us for our comments. This would not come back for action. That doesn't need to come back for action. Is that correct? Or are we asking that it does?
For action, but for report after 30 days.
Okay.
I have some comments about it. I frankly don't like the procedures, two parts of it as written, and if it did come to action, I'd vote against it at this point. What I have a problem with, on page 97, it talks about the personal electronic devices for the younger kids are to be turned off and off the person. However, for the older kids, it's turned off and out of sight. I'm completely convinced that the best thing we can do in schools is for these cell phones, these electronic devices, to be turned off and off the person also at the higher grades. I've spoken to this before. Some of the research and some of the readings I've done are pretty clear that the farther the cell phone is away from the student, the better the student is. You know, I did share with the boards some research where they basically had kids who had cell phones on their desk, cell phones in their pocket, and then the third group was cell phones like in a backpack across the room or outside. And as far as their attention, as far as their focus, as far as how the kids did on tests and all the measures they used, the farther the cell phone was away from the student, the better off they were. Otherwise, they were a distraction. I think it's too easy if a kid has it in his pocket to look at it. So I would like to see the wording changed. I have some real concern about how that's worded. And I would like that our procedure be that they are turned off and off the person. How that's handled by the teacher, whether that's or by the school, whether that means that a cell phone is in a backpack, whether it's in a bin at the front of the classroom, whether it's in a locker. I don't care where it is. I think having the cell phone, though, on the person, even if it's off, I just think it's too hard to monitor. It's not good for the kids. It's too difficult. It's one more stress for the teachers having to see if, in fact, this really is off. I just think that it should be off and off, turned off and off the person. So my proposal, at least, is that we change the wording on page 97. While I have the floor, I'll speak also quickly to my other concern, and then we can get back and have a discussion about this, obviously. My concern is also that I think on this discipline issue on page 99 and 100, we give these kids far too many chances. If you notice here, they have 5 different levels of offenses, from warnings to a meeting with the parent to on and on. I think that's far too many chances. I think they have 2 or 3 and that's it. I think they shouldn't, if they've, and what I mean by that's it, that means that they don't have this, they don't have their cell phone at school for the rest of the semester or however that works. I think after the second or third chance, that's how I feel about it. I think I just think we're playing too many games with these. So, and I don't think teachers are there in the classroom to be monitoring cell phone use. They have lots of things to do. You know, just this morning on the news, I was listening to some a news story talking about the addictive qualities of these devices, and this person was a person who worked for Google, and who is working with this group now that's trying to get the tech companies to deal with this issue. And Apple and Google and Samsung and all these other big companies to get them to deal with this issue. And they admit it themselves, it's addictive. And I, carry my cell phone around a lot too, but I think in a classroom setting, I think that they should be off their person. And I will have maybe some further comments, but I'd be interested what the rest of the board has to say on this.
Dave, I know you're looking to hit the button there, but if I can just talk about that one just real quick. If you remember, or maybe you don't remember, and I'll remind you, but last month we had a lot of discussion around that topic, and we needed to give some direction to administration so they could develop the procedures here. And so we took a vote where we said who's okay with this and who isn't. And on that specific part was phones on the person. And there were 3 trustees who were willing to support that. I believe that was myself and Lisa and Tambra, and 2 who were not. And so I don't want to throw that on administration like they didn't do what we asked, because they did. That's what we told them we wanted to do, at least by majority rule. I know we weren't in unanimous consent on that, but I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I'm aware of the fact that we gave them that direction. I also intend to vote against the policy later because I think the policy is wrong. And obviously procedure comes out of policy. I think I will vote against the policy also if it doesn't change. But yeah, I'm not saying Seth and his team didn't do well on this. They did what they were instructed to do. I just think it's wrong.
Okay.
My turn?
Go ahead.
I have pressed the button. Hey, I have a statement to share with you. Since first raising a red flag over student cell phone use in our secondary schools last October, I have now spoken publicly about this issue multiple times, and I think most everyone here knows where I stand. But in case you don't, the bottom line for me is, with negotiated exceptions for high school lunch and passing periods, similar to what happens in most adult workplaces, and for specific teacher-directed undertakings with the principal's express permission, I am opposed to the policy revision before us, which will allow students to have their cell phones in class so long as they are turned off and the teacher doesn't see them. My opposition is based on 43 years of real-life experience as a classroom teacher, along with the knowledge of the problems created or made worse by already having allowed students' cell phones in our classrooms, whether the teachers knew they were turned on and saw them or not. Those problems include, among others, more distractions, more disruptions, new and easier ways to cheat, and occasionally even pornography. If this policy revision is adopted, how will a teacher actually know if every one of maybe 30 cell phones in his classroom is turned off every minute of class? Will he spend more time teaching or monitoring the phones? And keeping your cell phone out of the teacher's sight will quickly become a challenge any red-blooded American teenager will accept with gusto. So long as students' cell phones are allowed in their possession in our classrooms, no matter the conditions, the problems I have described to you above will continue. You tell your 16-year-old not to text and drive, and guess what he's probably doing before he's even out of the driveway. But don't get me wrong, cell phones in the right hands and the right time and setting, as we all know, are incredibly wonderful and helpful tools. Amazing, in fact. I mean, who's going to object to having instant access to the accumulated knowledge of all time? But with social media, texting, and Snapchatting a part of the package, it doesn't take a rocket science to see that in the hands of a typical teenager operating at some degree of immaturity at least, today's algebra, history, foreign language, or science lesson is probably going to come up pretty short on the interest scale. I have a few questions for everyone to consider. Given the distractions, disruptions, the easier means of cheating, and the pornography we have already experienced with student cell phones in our classrooms, and given that improving academic standards across the district is one of our primary district and board goals for this year, how can you even imagine student cell phones in our kids' hands in the classrooms will help achieve this goal? And how will ready availability of such addictive and distractive devices in our students' possession in class legitimately improve academic achievement? Will the constant pull of the cell phone, and Tom was talking about this earlier, in a kid's pocket make him more likely to engage socially, eyeball to eyeball with his peers? Will it help improve his critical thinking skills? Will it promote greater curiosity of the world about him? Or will it have the opposite effect? Psychologists are now telling us that just having it in his pocket is a distraction by itself. As we prepare to vote on this policy revision, maybe later during this meeting, I'd like to add 4 additional comments for you to consider. Number 1, teaching in our public schools has never been more difficult than it is right now. Kids have never presented so many different challenges, and honestly, parents have never been more demanding and threatening. I will not support, and I would ask my fellow trustees not to support, any policy that needlessly makes a classroom teacher's job more difficult. Number 2, there is no compelling need for a student to bring his own device to school. We have enough devices for every student already, and they come with school-appropriate filters, and no social media is included. Number 3, with my proposal, parents can still connect with their kids in school during passing periods, at lunch, and just before and after school. Let's work together to preserve the sanctity of classroom instruction for quality teaching and quality learning with the fewest interruptions possible. And finally, the last thing I want to share with you, I think you should know that academically, Canfield Middle School is the single highest performing secondary school in our district. And there are certainly a number of reasons why this is so. But one reason could be that Canfield students are not allowed to have their cell phones in their possession from the first bell to the last bell without the principal's permission, just so you know. Thank you.
Trustee Eubanks, just to clarify there, since I have a child at Canfield, they're not allowed to have their phones on, but they are allowed to have them in their possession. That was changed about 2 years ago at their policy there, and I'll tell you why it was changed.
I just talked to Nick Lilliquist 2 weeks ago.
I can...
Okay.
All right. What I was told by Mr. Lilliquist, the reason they made that change is because they had staff members who were uncomfortable confronting students with a phone in their pocket because there had been a harassment complaint by a parent that the teacher was somehow harassing the student by visually inspecting their rear pocket. And so they changed that policy at that school.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Trustee Morrisroe. But I still stand on everything else I said.
Can I have a quick question for you?
Yeah.
So what would your ideal policy look like? Because you mentioned that students could reach out to parents in passing. But if their cell phone is not on their person, are they going to their locker to access it to text mom or figure out when the work schedule? Or
well, the last time we had this discussion, I came around to the idea that they could access their cell phones during passing period, and they could access their cell phones during lunch.
Right.
And if they have to go to their locker to do it, fine. If they can't get to their locker in time, that's also fine. But I would like to secure the most positive teaching and learning environment in our classrooms possible. And I've read the same studies Tom Hearn has referred to here about how kids teenagers especially, who have their cell phones on their person.
There we go.
Just on cue, okay? Are dealing with a certain level of anxiety because they're wondering who's trying to get in touch with me. What am I missing? And maybe even, dang, I can't wait to see what my uncle is having for dinner or whatever, okay?
I have a
Or
follow-up
lunch.
question, though, real quick, not to interrupt you. So if the cell phone's turned off, like our new policy says, and it's in a child's backpack, is anybody going to know whether that's in the backpack or in a locker? And so I think the point is, if this policy is enforced as it's written, you wouldn't know whether the cell phone was in the child's backpack that's sitting at his feet if it's turned off or if it's in their locker. So I think I hear what you're saying, but I'm also saying this policy, and thank you to Zeth and the team for putting this together, can achieve that. I agree, cell phones should be off in the classroom, but whether they're in the locker or turned off in a backpack, I'm not sure you would know the difference if the policy is being enforced. I guess that's my question.
You wouldn't know the difference, but the problem as I see it is kids trying to get around the policy. And here you have the teacher, once again, who's already dealing with a book that falls on the floor, somebody falls out of their chair, somebody's giving an announcement in the middle of the period, monitors are coming in, and the usual stuff that goes on in a classroom. And now you have, I can't find my cell phone, or so-and-so posted something on my cell phone or about me on his cell phone, and I think I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. I would like to see a situation, and if you can enforce this legitimately and fully, where teachers don't have to deal with this at all. And I don't think it's possible. Prove me wrong.
I agree. I think regardless of what the policy is, this is, it's going to be an issue. Even if you can't have the phone in your pocket, turned off in your pocket. Guess what? Kids are going to have them in their pocket. Kids who want to use a phone are still going to use a phone, or at least attempt to. There's still going to be a need for enforcement, regardless of what the policy is.
Of course. That's a big reason why we're here, today after all of this over the last 3 years.
Just for clarification on passing periods, the recommendation in this procedures is no during passing periods, and my understanding is that's from administration and from feedback that they had, that they just felt with 4-minute passing periods, you can't have kids distracted using
And I did raise that issue when last we talked about this, okay? All right.
Obviously, enforcement is going to be an issue, no matter what policy you have. But it's our job to set the standard. It's our job to back up our teachers. It's our job to use our best judgment. Of course, any policy, people try to get around it, and kids are going to try to get around it. I still think that if the cell phone is off the person, in a backpack, maybe across the room, sitting by the door, in a bin somewhere, in their locker, somewhere not on them, I'm fine with it. How that's worked by how principals or teachers figure that out in their school, I will accept their judgment on that. But I think we set the standard, and I think over time, I really believe over time, kids will get the message. Probably not a good idea to bring my cell phone to school, or certainly not to bring it into the classroom. I think over time it's going to take a cultural change, but I think it's the right step, because I really think we need to protect as Dave called it, kind of the sanctity of the classroom setting. Without teachers having to, oh my God, I heard a buzz over on, the kid in the third row, he's got it in his pocket or something, or she does, or he or she has the little earbuds in their ear and covered by their hair, and there'll be times that they'll have to discipline, yes, but I think over time, with consistent enforcement, with consistent buy-in of the staff, which I hope the staff will buy in on, the administrators backing them up, that this will be the right move. Now, over time, technology is going to change. We'll, probably be 5 years from now dealing with implants or something, or something. But right now, where we're at, I think this is the right way to go.
Are you saying that about this policy as it stands right now?
No, I'm
Tom?
saying with my suggested changes, which were the policy later on. I'm going to vote against it if we don't change it.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the procedure. I think the procedure.
So the procedure we're looking at, and it'll come back to us in 30 days, and I just ask that it come back to us for action, even though that's not our normal process. We could kick this thing around forever, and at some point we may just have to agree to disagree. I think just in the interest of moving the conversation along, this procedure is going to be back to us later. In half an hour or so, we're going to be voting on the policy, and depending how that vote goes on the policy, we can address the procedure next month. But let's not beat the procedure until we know what the policy is.
A quick
If
question.
that's okay.
Would it be difficult if it changed so it had to be in a backpack versus like in a back pocket? Because I do see what they're saying about the buzzing and the child feels it, but if it's in their backpack or in a purse, do you think that would be attainable as far as enforcement if it was in a bag? You know what I mean? So it's not on their person, but it's turned off.
When Seth visited with the different principals, originally under the middle school, we had off-person, similar to elementary school, and he received feedback from the principals that that was something very difficult to deal with. Similar to what Casey mentioned, there were teachers, whether you can see it in the back pocket, were uncomfortable approaching a student. So the suggestion we received from the schools was out of sight. So as far as back pocket, backpack, purse, locker, out of sight, and it's not going off, then they thought that would be something they could reasonably enforce.
I want to say I was quite happy with this procedure because it was fairly concise for a lot of information. So I think they did a nice job with it. The one thing I also like about it is that they were pretty specific in that this is the low bar, this is the minimum standard, and if a teacher wants to have stricter standards in their classroom, by all means do so. And I think they made that apparent. In the feedback we've received from teachers and staff members, it's been as varied as what we've heard from parents. I think people are all over, with the exception of students, they're all over the map on this.
I just want to...
And this, we're not chiseling this in stone. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We can always do something different.
And I have doubts because we did something like this 3 years ago, and it just kind of fell apart everywhere. And I'm concerned that it's going to happen again. I do want to add one other thing, and I saw a story about an entrepreneur over in Washington somewhere, I'm not sure where, who was dealing with a school system where they had banned cell phones from the first bell to the last bell, and they didn't have lockers sufficient for everyone to lock them up. So somebody had taken a van and they had modified it so that they could store through the day, maybe 1,000 or 1,500 cell phones for $1 a day. And they would show up before school would start in the morning, collect all these cell phones, and then be there at the end of the day to give them back. Oh yeah, for $1 a day. I mean, not a bad idea, but just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah,
I'm not going to do that.
I saw that in New York City. They're doing the same thing, yes.
Okay.
Because the kids, they actually just kind of repealed that, but that was New York City. That was their policy.
The bottom line for me again is I just want our teachers to not have to deal with this.
I agree.
That sounds great. All right, let's move. Are we okay? We'll move on.
Well, I do want to. I will want us to address a discipline issue too later, but I've said enough on that. I think
Sure.
the discipline issue is off.
Yeah. So
we give way too many chances.
We'll have 30 days of comment, and we'll have this back for action next month on the procedures. Okay. All right. Now we're going to roll into the Dr. Nelson show. There's a couple folks that have joined us recently. So, Dr. Nelson, if you will, just before you join us, folks, later on in the schedule, we had an action item for an elementary site selection, and we'll still be having that discussion, but we won't be making that decision tonight. So if you've come late to hear that, you're welcome to stay for our discussion, but don't be expecting a decision on that tonight. Now I'll turn it over to Dr. Nelson. We're at item E with new course proposals.
Yes, Chair Morris Rowe, Superintendent Olson, and members of the board, I'm so sorry. About half of this agenda has my name on it. It wasn't purposeful, but it is some really good work that we wanted to bring you up to date on. Normally, we would bring you new course proposals in November. Well, based on the recommendation that you had made last month to move social studies graduation requirements and a new opportunity, we have 4 for you this evening. The first comes from Venture High School, and I'm sorry we didn't have any samples for you tonight. But they are requesting a new course called International Cuisine. Right now they offer 2 courses in their food service and handling program. What this would do is actually give them a capstone course, which would then allow them to earn additional funding from the state of Idaho and provide a full pathway for students to be able to get certifications in this area. So you will be able to see a fully designed course proposal in front of you that we'd love to be able to have your feedback on and from our community in the next 30 days. In addition, because of your work around social studies, teams from both Coeur d'Alene, Lake City, and Venture High Schools have met together to take a look at the additional flexibility they now have within social studies. If you look about world history specifically, we start teaching world history in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade. Kids are understanding more about their world. And to the point where we saw a lot of overlap in 6th grade, 7th grade, and into the high schools. They were talking about ancient Greece over and over, and they were talking about Egypt over and over. We've tried to streamline a little bit better. So these new course proposals for both Coeur d'Alene and Lake City High School put more of a modern approach onto world history. Lake City High School has kind of a semester offering that they would like to offer, 2 different semesters that would basically adjoin each other. The first would be a course called 20th Century Europe, which of course would focus on just that geographical area, and a 2nd semester course offering which would focus on Africa and the Middle East, of course, very newsworthy at those particular areas as well. Coeur d'Alene High School would like to rebrand their current world history course as Western Civilization, again focusing a little bit more and more on the modern. But the nice thing is if these courses matriculate through the process and are eventually approved by you, they would be available at Coeur d'Alene and Lake City High Schools and vice versa. So as we learn more and feel more comfortable without expanding these options, they may be good for everybody within our district as well. So those are the 4 course proposals that are available for you this evening.
Okay, any questions for Dr. Nelson on these? Dr. Nelson, I have one on the Lake City courses there. So they're 2 separate courses, a semester-based each. And is it possible that a student would take one and then not take the other?
That is certainly a possibility. Remember, there are many courses that would meet this graduation requirement, and this would simply be 2 new options. A student may be able to take the standard world history course that we currently offer as the 2nd semester.
All right, thank you. Okay. Well, if there's no further questions, we'll move on to number F.
And Chair Morrisroe, Superintendent Olson, and members of the board, we talked a lot about board-appointed committees this evening. And one of them that you have not heard from this year at all is our ELA Ad Hoc Committee. You had purposed them in the July meeting for looking at materials, specifically novels, to support instruction. The reason that we have not heard from them is because we're currently pursuing ELA adoption right now for grades 6 through 12. So we haven't had any new novel proposals, and we haven't had anybody really wanting to shake up or add variety and depth to what we currently offer until those core materials are identified. So what I'd like to ask of you this evening is that we change the purpose that you originally tasked them with in July to be the base for that upcoming adoption, giving them an opportunity to be that sounding board that would be available to look at all of our work, make sure that we're aligning ourselves with board policy, state standards, and eventually make a recommendation to you in addition to the content committee.
Is that restatement in the packet, Dr. Nelson?
I didn't write anything specific because this is for information this evening. I can certainly put something to our clerk as soon as possible, but I didn't have anything specifically written for this evening. But in my memo, you'll find enough meaty stuff to be able to create something if that's what you wish.
154, thank you. Well, I was way beyond it. Oh, yeah, I had a bad download, so I didn't get that page. Okay, I'll check it out. Okay, any questions for Dr. Nelson on this? All right, moving along, item G.
Moving right along, we have brand new course pacing guides. Throughout the years, we bring small content teams in to take a look at what we're currently teaching and identify any additions or adjustments that need to be made. Over the past month, we've been working with our elementary social studies teachers. So you see brand new course pacing guides that match our content from Studies Weekly in grades 1, 2, 3, and 5. You'll notice the omission of grade 4 because you approved a one-year purchase of Exploring Idaho History. We are in the process of reviewing the new title, the new edition of that right now, and that will come to you later this year for consideration for adoption. So fourth grade will be 1 year behind in the process. In addition, we brought our elementary Spanish teachers together at the middle schools. This is more of an exploratory. It does not match our Spanish 1 content, but it's something that had not been looked at for about 10 years since the program had been started, and our teachers were eager to be able to get some new information to be able to kind of spice that up a little bit. So I have, again, elementary Spanish and then K 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in your packet for information this evening.
Any questions for Dr. Nelson on this? Seeing none, we are moving on to item H.
Phew, get to stand up a little bit now. Over the course of the last 4 months, your ad hoc content committee for secondary mathematics has been meeting. And you may remember that the purpose of this together was to take a look at this. These are our ISAT results in secondary mathematics. No one is pleased with this slide. And we have talked over and again at our data summits and in our teams at the high schools as to really what that 29% represents at the high school level. Specifically also, we are underachieving when we take a look at a comparison against other large districts and our neighboring districts as well. So we've been bringing people together to be able to take a look at how this has come to be, what are some of the symptoms and possible remedies for this. Personally, I'd like to thank our trustee, Tambra Pickford, who has attended our meetings, in addition to Matt Werner from Lake City High School, one of our teachers. We also have Kristen Baldridge, an educator in our community, Dr. Trina Cottle, our Director of Secondary Education, who's with us this evening. Chris Shipley, our Director of Finance and Operations, has been able to attend our meetings. The principal of Lake City High School, Mrs. Deanne Clifford, is here this evening. And Jason Drosch from North Idaho College is also here, the math department chair. We've been very lucky that we've had a pretty good brain trust that has taken a look at this, not only from looking at where we're at coming in from the middle school, but also focusing on what kind of students do we want to matriculate into our post-secondary institutions. So we've taken a look at everything from our PSAT to our SAT to the quality of instruction that we have, the content that we have. But we also kind of focused on this slide. If you look at the standards, there are 3 tenets that are really coming out: focus, coherence, and rigor. And we had to do something that addresses those 3 areas. So when we look at our current materials and our current scope and sequence, this is what we see. We see a lot of that is being measured in our Algebra 1 courses. Some of that is being measured in our Algebra 2 courses. But we have an entire year focused on geometry that doesn't address more than a third of it. In addition, we have some content coming out of the middle school and even into pre-calculus after Algebra 2. So really, we've been focusing on how do we better organize all of this together. I'd like to also introduce you to Liza McNamee, who is joining us as well. She's a local statistician and has been part of our group. Thank you, Liza, for being here. So we have, again, met for several times, and one of the challenges that we actually had to the longest discussions is who's going to chair this committee. We actually had to pass that off several times, but I'd like to welcome Mr. Sam Hunter to the podium. Sam's like a good penny. He always tends to come back, and I don't know why he hasn't changed his email address nor his cell phone number at this point, But I am so gracious that Sam has stood up on behalf of our committee to tell you a little bit more about our work.
Well, I'm here because I'm a parent. That's the first reason. The second reason is there are no bad schools in the Coeur d'Alene School District. My kids went to Boer Elementary, Lakes Middle School, and Coeur d'Alene High School. And my daughter is going to graduate this spring, and she's in Boise as a Senate page right now. So that's kind of a short snapshot of me. And I see teachers and other friends in the room that I've had conversations and worked with over the years. So it's not my first day out. So what about math? Well, let me tell you, I'm an Idaho high school grad. And back before dirt was invented, I took Algebra 1 and Geometry and Algebra 2. And it wasn't easy as a student even back then to start algebra, stop algebra, start geometry, stop geometry, and then somehow think that you're going to really roar into Algebra 2. It was particularly difficult because I didn't do well in Algebra 2, but when I went to college, I was a science major, and I had to do well in math. So I had to catch up on math. And as life unfolded, I had to go back to school again and again. So yes, I did have math again as a master's level student, and I had math again as a doctoral student, and I do have a PhD, so I made it through all those hoops. But the question is, how do we prepare students the best we can? And I think this is a great process that we're looking at. And I've had several conversations with the committee members, and I really want you to know what a stellar group of people that you've got in the community that stepped up to talk about this and to work on it. So with all confidence, I think that moving in the direction of a more integrated idea for algebra and geometry makes a lot of sense. And as a parent, I think it really makes sense because I think it's easier for a parent to work with the student and the teachers to accomplish the learning that needs to take place. So, so I advance these.
Hit the magic space bar there.
So all these things, you know about these things, ISATs and SATs and all those things. We at the district have adopted, all of us together have adopted a curriculum. It's usable. We're not proposing to do anything different with curriculum right now, but to go ahead and use what we already have. And this isn't a quick fix, but it's a way to really boost the learning. So I like to think of it as moving from 3 discrete boxes or 3 discrete buildings to one building that has stuff inside. So if you have a 3-car garage at your house, you might have car A in your garage and car B in your garage and car C in your garage, and maybe you've labeled the doors for them. I know some people have a Seahawks door and a different door on their house. But anyway, instead of having 3 doors labeled algebra, geometry, and algebra 2, we're proposing to have one big box, and it allows for a lot of flexibility and allows for those things, focus, coherence, and rigor, and really, frankly, empowers our teachers to do some great teaching within that big box that's going to probably move us up considerably in terms of results. So integrated math. One of the things that I've talked about is naming. I think naming of this is going to be important, and I don't know how to name it differently, but 1, 2, 3 doesn't sound really that great to me, but it's definitely going to be the same subject content, but just presented as an integrated way. So it's going to result in some really positive things for students. Also for those students who are college bound, it's going to help them on their way to that focus. But it's also going to be good for just every student, even if they're not college bound. It's going to help a lot. So Math 1, Math 2, Math 3. And I don't know whether it should be A, B, C, or parts 1, 2, 3, or whatever, but anyway, that's how we're seeing it. So it's still 3 years. It still covers those key topics. And so but it allows for a lot more integration. We don't have a detailed implementation plan, do we?
Come in next month.
So the questions, you can ask a lot of questions, but the bottom line is, I think that with the stellar team that you've got, I'll tell you that we've talked a lot about the integration with students coming out of middle school. We think that the committee thinks that there's going to be a good transition for middle school students into this kind of a learning environment. And we've talked with Jason and his colleagues at the higher education level, and they are saying that this will be a good way to transition students that are well prepared to go into higher education. So Jason's with NIC. So maybe if you have questions, it's a good time to ask them.
First of all, I really appreciate the work you're doing and the fact that, and I do think the quality of the people in the committee is pretty amazing. My only real questions are does what you're doing, and I'm sure this question's maybe already been answered, but it does align with what colleges want to see on transcripts, right? So colleges aren't going, what are they doing in Coeur d'Alene District? And it'll align with that. And secondly, it sounds like once it's implemented and up and going, the SAT scores should improve because you'll actually be addressing some of these topics before the kids take the test, which was a problem we heard repeatedly, that
exactly.
There were questions on the SAT test that the kids had never even been introduced to. And they were following the normal course pacing. So I guess I don't know if that's a question or not, but I guess
the first question you raised was exactly the question I raised. So if a student from Coeur d'Alene applies to a college or university, we want to be very clear about what this integrated math will produce in terms of the topics of Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. So it has to be very clearly stated what they've covered by Math 1, 2, 3. And Jason, do you want to talk about the higher ed?
With your permission.
Thank you. So I can't necessarily speak on behalf of NIC, but as a math faculty member and as one who evaluates transcripts that students bring to us from other institutions, I work with a lot of high school students, a lot of parents, dual credit, things like that. One of the most important things that we found with this work is that students, they might be getting the material, but we're testing them before they've reached that point. So in other words, their SAT is happening in their junior year, but a lot of these students are continuing in their math, right? Senior year math. And so one of our core concerns was making sure that we had students that were adequately prepared to demonstrate their mathematical proficiency. And this seemed like the most efficient way to guarantee that all students had that learning within the context. I think backing up a little bit, so that perspective would be on placement, right? So we're talking about, you had mentioned making sure that higher ed institutions would evaluate the transcript properly from high school. And I think the number one concern are students placing where they should be placing. So in other words, are they placing at a college level? And one of the things that we noticed with all the other school districts doing the integrated approach, their students were placing at a much higher level. And I think a big portion of that is that students learned how to learn within the context of the subject. And so they weren't seeing a question that was maybe asked differently. They were seeing a question that they knew how to solve, though the presentation might have been different. And I think that's the prime benefit to an integrative approach. I would also add from a career technical perspective that by guaranteeing that students have been exposed to learning geometry, probability, and statistics, as well as the abstraction of algebra, we're preparing our students to go into a more technical trades and industry sort of field. I'm sure trades and industry is not quite the right word, but the perspective that I'm trying to represent as one who also teaches technical mathematics for welding, for machining, we need them to be able to solve geometric, trigonometric problems, but we also need them to be able to understand the kind of abstraction of a formula and the application of that. And so this is one really solid way we can expose all of our students to that full perspective of mathematics. So we're not just teaching algebra that's devoid of the context of geometry or vice versa. We're also introducing the probability, statistics, the number sense that we're often finding is lacking on these placement exams.
This is all good and long overdue, and I commend all of you for what you're doing. But if you send transcripts off to, say, the University of Pennsylvania, they're going to know what Math 1, Math 2, and Math 3 has entailed, and they'll be able to translate that into something more recognizable, correct?
Yes.
Because that's the basic question.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can give you a little bit of a basis on that. First of all, we have to use course titles that are approved by the NCAA for these types of things. Math 1, Math 2, Math 3 are already approved, and course content is already there. It's really then up to the local district to say, well, what constitutes Math 1? What components of mathematics do you put in there that makes up Math 1? This presentation tonight is intended to put this out there for you. Next month, we'd like to present you with a detailed implementation plan, which gives you a lot more of that details specifically. We have it pretty much lined up, but we want to make sure that all of our stakeholders are fully embedded within that plan, and that we present to you something that will not only have an understanding of what curricula looks like, what our assessments look like, what kind of community outreach and engagement and professional development we're planning with all of this as well. And a lot of that will be detailed within it.
Mike, I have a quick question. I know last year there was a lot of concern over curriculum and if you guys were ready for this implementation. What has changed this year, and what did the committee, how did they view the curriculum? Is what we have going to work? Do we need to augment?
Matt, do you want to talk about it? Sure. With your permission?
I believe your question was, is the curriculum we have going to work? Or
Correct.
So no text is perfect out there. I want to start with that. And to use resources in your room, as any teacher, English, science, math, you're going to use a variety of sources. The textbook we have right now that we chose upwards of 3 years ago, I think I'm around there, we use that. The teachers are using that. And what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to use the geometry and algebra textbook in our classrooms to be able to follow the course, follow the mapping that our ad hoc committee has come up with in terms of covering those subjects from Algebra 1 through Algebra 2, including geometry. And so it's not so much a resource question as it is how we use the current resources we have. If in an adoption year that comes up, I've heard the 2020, 2021, if you're getting ready to buy a minivan, it's probably not a good idea to buy one right after the baby's born. Maybe you watch a little bit what you're going to need in terms of your needs. This isn't a great analogy, but if we start integrated, now, we're going to be far better consumers, or know what we want to purchase in terms of curriculum. Is there a curriculum out there that would be perfect? Potentially, but we wouldn't know. I'm not saying we wouldn't know it if we saw it, but we're going to know better what that curriculum could be in a couple of years. We may be just fine with what we currently have. Could be trailing off here too much, but.
One quick follow-up question on that. Professional development, will that be included in the plan that we'll see next month on how professional development is going to look across the district, or?
Yeah, Mike, yeah. What this team has done is put teachers on this ad hoc committee, myself being one. I've been in this district 17 years. I feel very well supported in terms of asking for things. And myself and the other faculty member, Adam Hannon, we're there not to make sure that it happens, but we're being asked, what type of professional development, Matt, would you think is going to need for this to happen? I'm not saying I will get everything I ask for, but I am there at that meeting saying we need professional development days. We need to be able to pull Algebra 1 teachers together to do this. And I'm being assured, as an employee of the district, that yes, Matt, your faculty members, your peers, we will have professional development there for you. I attend the ad hoc committees, and when things aren't being, if I feel like something needs to be voiced, my principal standing right there, and my principal's boss standing right there. Yes, I'm not afraid to say, hey, we need this, and this needs to be part of the plan, and no one has told me no yet.
And one of the things that I could add with the professional development, we're already doing great professional development, not just with the text. We've got our Minds on Math trainings that are going on right now. So the plan is not to stop that and say everything that we've done is wrong. The plan is to build upon that, to better sequence our work, to use the materials that we have so that the work of teaching math becomes really what we're an expertise at. Then at that point, absolutely, if a curriculum adoption is necessary, funds will be available in the future to be able to do that.
Speaking of materials, just a couple of years ago, we appropriated about $1 million for new materials for all of our math classes.
Correct.
I'd like to know if what you're talking about, these materials are still in use and they're still relevant.
They are.
Okay, all right.
Every student has a text. They still will have texts when these materials come to be. Again, I think we'll be able to flush that out for you a little bit. We just wanted to give you the shot over the bow tonight. But we do have a plan that we'd like to present to you the next month.
Dr. Nelson, thank you very much, and thanks for this great attendance from your committee. One thing I heard brought up from, and I'm sorry I didn't catch his name, but the gentleman from North Idaho College.
Jason?
Was about 4 years of math, or 3 years of math, kids taking stuff in their senior year. Did the committee look at changing our requirement and maybe going to requiring 4 years of mathematics?
Well, our state helps us in that because our state requires algebra, geometry, and senior math. It is a misnomer, however, that a student takes 1 year of algebra, 1 year of geometry, takes a whole year of math off, and then finishes up in the senior year. They are highly encouraged at each of our high schools already to take 4 years of math. And it makes no sense for us to change that pathway. What this would do, however, is this would build a greater on-ramp for students to be able to take upper-level mathematics with us, our pre-calculus, our calculus AB, our calculus BC, more than we're seeing right now. Because again, the coverage of standards would be much better, giving students greater opportunities to be able to do that. Plus, the expansion of dual credit hits North Idaho College especially in this area. They're going to be able to see students who are able to go take advanced coursework more readily because they are going to have that. And again, if the plan ultimately does pass your muster, we could be hitting students in the 8th grade with our first year of integrated math.
So so you're saying the practice is most students take 4 years of math?
The practice is every student is encouraged to take 4 years of math.
So maybe I'll ask a question a different way. If every student is encouraged, and most are doing so, and we know that they perform better when they do so, and we know our performance is not where they want it to be, should we change our requirements and require 4 years of high school math?
I have my own personal preference. I would still say no. But Deanne, would you like to answer that question on behalf of
maybe not answer tonight,
okay.
but
something to consider, absolutely. We can bring it back to the
maybe
committee.
the committee could consider that.
Sure.
I heard you mention pre-calculus and calculus. So does Math 3 then cover pre-calculus, or is that?
Some elements, but it would dovetail right into pre-calculus, calculus, probability statistics. It would basically set students up for whichever pathway they were to choose.
So then we'd have to ensure our high-performing students are enrolled in Math 1 in 8th grade. Otherwise, they would not be available to take advanced statistics, AP calculus. So that gives me a little pause that we're really going to have to be identifying students early on to ensure they're in the correct pathway to take these higher-level math courses.
And Trustee May, we already do that. So our students in ALP Math 8 are essentially taking Algebra 1.
Okay, so they will be now taking Math 1.
Ultimately, if this plan were to be approved, when it's presented to you, that course would be replaced by Math 1.
Okay.
So then those same
So then
students
as a
could
junior,
continue
they're
through.
pre-calculus and on to whatever
Exactly.
it is. Okay.
And again, I think I may have opened my mouth a little bit too much tonight, but we're excited about our work. And I'm blessed to be able to work with people who have so given of their time to be able to think thoroughly about the problem that we have and to come up with a solution that they think is plausible to you.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson.
I have one last comment.
Go ahead.
You know, this number up there, this 29, is very troubling.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to put you on the spot. But what do you think the chances are that we could maybe double that in 3 years?
First of all, I like the way you think. Second of all, you will see a plan, when the plan is presented to you, you will see our goals that are in there. And I will tell you that, again, we're not shooting low. We have an expectation in this community as to how our students achieve. And we need to address this.
2 years? Never mind, I'm just teasing.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson.
Absolutely.
I feel this is one of the most important issues facing our district, so.
We're hoping to address
Thank you
it.
for your work on this. Not next. Okay, item J is an item district external boundaries discussions.
Thought I had one more, Chair.
Oh, you do? I'm sorry. Aye, you're right.
I can
New
understand why
course
you want to get rid
proposal.
of me.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you all. So shall we hit our last topic, which is creative coding for games and apps?
It's your last topic. We've got a
That's
few
true.
more. We've got a few more.
True. Chair Morris, Rose Superintendent Olson, and members of the board, 2 years ago you approved a course. This course is using content from Microsoft Corporation, and it's intended to be an on-ramp for students to be able to understand coding. We placed this course at the high school level. However, after 2 years of instruction, the course content in terms of level is fine. The quality or the course delivery is a little too juvenile. Our students are coming back and saying, you know what, I'm really not as engaged with caricatures, and I'm really not engaged by the slowness of the pace of the course. So we tonight are making the first ever time that I've kind of remember doing this, of asking you to remove graduation requirements from a course and move the content of the course from high school to middle school. This would help us in a variety of different ways. Number one, we currently don't have a coding course at the middle school level. It would give an opportunity for us to be able to start students a little early who have a passion in coding and, of course, creative programming. The second thing that it would do is give us greater flexibility towards meeting high school graduation requirements by putting higher level courses back at the high school. So right now we have 4 different courses that could meet our pathway. Hopefully within the next year we have a total of 8, so that we can even offer up to AP computer science. So we have a lot of good options, but we really do think that the content for this course is misplaced.
Is it an elective course for middle school? Okay.
It is. It would be an elective course for middle school. It is currently an elective course at the high school level. We would move it down as an elective for the middle school as a request.
Okay, any other questions for
And you
Dr.
would move it
Nelson on
into all 3 middle schools?
As a middle school course, it would be available to all 3 middle schools.
Yes, what little I've read about coding, this is a move in the right direction.
Trustee Eubanks, I'd like to engage you within an hour of code, and I bet we could turn you into a programmer very soon.
Yeah, I'd rather farm.
How about?
It's okay.
No problem. We'll bring it out to you.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further questions. Okay, now on to item J, which was a district external boundaries discussion. And Stan, you asked me to handle this, I think, right?
Please.
Way to pass the buck there. So as some of you are aware, we've been, Stan and I have met with my counterpart and his counterpart with Post Falls School District, just to look at our district boundaries, our common boundary that we share with those folks, and see if there isn't a more efficient line that would enable us to serve communities that make sense, and put an end, at least hopefully an end, to all these annexation requests that we continue to see over and over and over again. And so we've met with those folks a few times. Post Falls will be discussing this next week at their meeting, but basically the same idea would be that we would come together, probably at our March board meeting, March 19th, or our March workshop, and have a joint workshop. We would invite our friends from Post Falls to come up here and sit on the dais with us. We would get a presentation from Dr. Olson and Dr. Keene on what it might look like, and we would then take public comment after that. And so in the meantime, if we're agreeable to this idea, and if Post Falls is agreeable to this idea next week when they meet, basically both districts would identify patrons and property owners that live within the potential impacted areas. They would send those folks registered notices, I believe is what the plan is, about what's going on, and we would do some advertisement and some push so people know about the workshop and public forum, and invite our patrons in and see what they think. So really tonight, I'm just looking for are you okay with that plan to have this conversation most likely here on March 19th?
It depends. If such a plan is put into effect, could we maybe have some more options for purchasing land sites, school sites? Because we have a big problem there.
Yeah. So, I mean, it would basically...
this is a rhetorical question.
Right. Redraw our boundary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is very good.
So Post Falls hasn't taken any action yet, but they're considering it just like we are.
They're going to, essentially do the same thing I'm doing here tonight, which is say, are we willing to come and listen and to get an idea what this might look like and hear from our patrons. And then once we do that, there's a kind of two pathways we could choose if we proceed as far as how we would go about requesting that boundary change be made.
And if both Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls School District agree on the boundary change, then doesn't the State Department of Education have to approve also? Is that another?
Yeah, there's basically two pathways. So one would be that we would petition the State Board of Education and ask that they make the determination. They may have some reluctancy to do that. We've been told because there are people impacted. It's not just vacant farmland. So if they're not comfortable with that pathway, we would have to go to the pathway we're more familiar with when these neighborhoods have done it. But the two districts would jointly petition this. It would go to there would be a public hearing by a state hearing examiner. The state board would then either approve or not approve. If they approve, then it would go to public vote. And it would be those areas that were impacted, those patrons that were impacted would have to vote and approve it by a 50% plus one majority. Okay. So one pathway, no public vote. One pathway would require a public vote. And I know, when we had our discussions, chime in anytime if you want, we talked, well, maybe even if we're going the no vote pathway, maybe we want to do an advisory vote. Or hold more of these, public forums,
And would you grandfather clause in students that are already,
I think that was the idea, and that'll be part of the discussion, I think, on the...
That would be a stumbling point for both districts, and the hope would be to remove all stumbling points. The only thing I'd add to what Chairman Morris-Rose already said is part of my work on the 19th of this month. You may recall that's a holiday here, but it's also the Day on the Hill program. So I'll stay down there and have an interface with some state board members. So we've already had a couple of conversations with the state board chair, and it's just to update them. When I talked with Linda Clark a while ago about this, she was a little surprised at how quickly we were moving and recognizing that we're not in an absolute definitive conclusion to the process. But we've had consistent conversations that there is kind of a unified view that an alteration in the boundaries makes sense for both districts and would be helpful for both districts along the way. So we're pressing our state board colleagues to become aware of what we're doing, and that will be soon, and I say this with my fingers crossed, we'll be soon knocking on their doors to take the next definitive steps in this action.
Best case, worst case scenario, what kind of a timeline are we looking at?
I would say months to, maybe 4 or 5 months might be best case, and I would say 12 months, maybe worst case, if it had to go to vote.
Good.
Now, if we were to be very, very fortunate and everything were to come together and that we'd have compliance from the populations impacted by potential boundary changes and the two boards of trustees, I think you're spot on, 4 to 5 months, and get this on the board docket and appear jointly. I have used the phrase, two districts holding hands in front of the State Board of Education, which is somewhat unusual for them in discussions about property. But two districts holding hands saying this makes all the sense in the world for first and foremost our students and our patrons, but for the work that all of us have to do with land transfers and development and the whole prospect of sensible boundaries. So we're on the path, and I just congratulate the work of our board chair in this process, but also Trustee Eubanks, who kicked this thing into gear in the fall of this past year with this crazy scribbling on this yellow sheet that I still have, saying we have an opportunity here to really make a nice difference for both the districts and move forward with some opportunities.
And the end result in this is that we will hope to get the boundaries of the Coeur d'Alene School District so that they conform to the boundaries of the city of Coeur d'Alene and the city of Hayden, the communities we serve.
That's also in play.
Yep, very good.
And as I mentioned, there are some patrons or population that would be impacted. One of those kind of major ones is the Trails subdivision, which has already petitioned on their own. It didn't go through, but they've already petitioned to move. And then the other area, according to Dr. Keene, a lot of the students in that area are actually fall in our zone, but they're currently attending Post Falls because the Post Falls schools are much closer to that area. So, but we'll have all that information, and they'll be able to say how many kids would be impacted or families would be impacted and all that sort of stuff. Okay. We're on to action items. K is our elementary site selection, which we agreed earlier this evening we're not going to take action on. Do we want to have some discussion on it? Do we just want to give a quick update? What's going on there and why we waited a week?
Is it possible to have a quick update?
If I give it.
then you do it. I know the front row wants to sit here for another 2 hours.
Okay, so what we discussed earlier this evening is we're really down to, at this point, probably 2 sites. The existing Nexus site or 7-ish acres that we're trying to acquire off Prairie Avenue. And so the reason we decided to hold off a week here is we're very close on having some final determinations on the Prairie Avenue site. And I think we felt it was prudent to go ahead and pause for a week while we see how that shakes out. Fair enough? Good representation?
Done.
Okay. So we'll be back together with a board meeting, probably an executive session on the 12th to discuss where we're at.
And we appreciate the support of the board in allowing that to happen.
Okay. Next action item is policy for action. I'm going to go ahead and break these apart. So the first one is 2377, animals in schools and classrooms. And we saw this last month. This is miniature horses and that sort of thing. And we had no comments. So if, I guess to get into discussion, we go ahead and ask, is there a motion to approve 2377, animals in schools and classrooms as presented?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this?
Well, as long as we don't have peacocks like they had, like I tried to get on the airline here recently as a comfort animal. I guess I'd be okay if we don't have peacocks walking around the schools, but that's...
Okay. So it's been motioned and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next up is 3265, our personal electronic devices. We spent quite a bit of time earlier discussing those. Again, proper procedure would be we make a motion and a second and then go into discussion. So is there a motion to approve policy 3265, personal electronic devices as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Well, I've spoke earlier on this issue. I would like to see the wording changed here on the first paragraph where it says devices should be powered off and out of sight in a classroom setting. I'd like to see it say powered off, out of sight, and off the person, as was discussed in the procedures. So I still think, you know, I'm not going to rehash the argument we had an hour ago, but I clearly think that we're making a mistake on this policy to not have it as tight as possible, and I'd like to see the wording change.
Okay, so I'll do this maybe efficiently. So, Trustee Eubanks, I assume you would support Mr. Hearn's proposal that we change the wording to say devices should be powered off, and currently it says and out of sight. And I believe Trustee Hearn's asking that they be powered off and off the person.
Yes,
Is that
that's what I'm
fair
asking.
representation?
And stored somewhere outside the classroom.
I'm not sure. It has to be outside the classroom, but I think it has to be off the person, though. It could be in a bin at the front of the classroom. It could be in a backpack over on the wall
Okay.
somewhere.
Yeah.
It could be somewhere. It's just not on the person.
So, Mr. Hearn's asking that we would change that to read, devices should be powered off and off the person in a classroom setting unless use is authorized by school staff. So, Tambra, Lisa, do you have an opinion on that?
I like how it's worded already. I think that in one section it gives teachers the ability to decide in their classrooms what that would look like for them, giving them the option to have bins or the other suggestions that Mr. Hearn has talked about. So I'm okay with the language as it's written.
How about you, Trustee May? I heard you kind of asking just specifics on that earlier and kind of contemplating that idea.
You know, I could probably go either way. I think as long as they could have it in a backpack by their feet. The hard part is the enforcement, and so is the teacher then having to look for cell phones in back pockets, and does it become onerous and difficult to enforce? I don't know. I would have to defer, I guess, to the professionals in the room, but I could probably be persuaded for either or.
Dr. Cottle, on backpacks, what are the rules associated with backpacks at the school? I believe Canfield is no backpacks. I'm not sure about
Woodland
and
is no backpacks either.
Most of the middle schools require that backpacks are put away in lockers and not in classrooms. The high schools, a lot of times it depends on the school and the teacher.
Do girls carry purses anymore? They don't? Just curious. I haven't been in school in a long time.
I would say some do.
Some do?
And some don't. I don't sometimes because I can just put the cell phone in my back pocket. Or in my bag.
We've noticed. No.
Well, Trustee May talked about in a backpack. I'm okay with that. It sounds like backpacks aren't in classrooms that much, but I'm okay with that. I just don't think it should be in their pocket, on their person. I've said it repeatedly. I think the evidence is overwhelming. The research is overwhelming that if they have it on them, is buzzing, and I don't think the teachers have to go around looking at pockets. I think if it's off their person, are there going to be violations? Possibly, likely. You have kids.
What difference would it make to the student if they can't use it anyway and it's turned off and it's put in a backpack somewhere or in a locker and they can get it at lunch, and after school? What difference would it make to them? I'm just thinking that having it on their person is going to be a temptation some of our kids are going to be unable to resist.
Trustee Eubanks, I think you sold me right there with that logic, so I will support that. Off the person.
But in a backpack at their feet.
I'm fine within the,
Fine with it at their feet. It's just off their person.
even if it's in a cubby or whatever a teacher wants to.
I don't think a child should have to relinquish their cell phone. I feel really strongly about that, or I should say a young adult. And I think it should be accessible to them in emergency, in a purse, backpack, in the classroom.
Powered off and off the person. Can we
Yes.
make that work?
Can't make that work. I don't know. It's really up to the board, and then we would need to make adjustments to the procedures so that it matches that.
Okay. So.
I call for the question?
Yeah. So we would be changing the last sentence of the first paragraph to read, devices should be powered off and off the person in a classroom setting unless use is authorized by school staff for a specific educational purpose.
That's great. That's
Yeah, that's fine.
And replace it with off the person.
yes. That was yes. I suggested wording change. Thank you.
And so far as emergencies are concerned, what kind of an emergency are you thinking about? That where they might need their phone. We've had emergencies in classrooms forever.
Well, I will say, the worst case scenario, an emergency, the child is calling for help when they're locked down in the classroom. But even beyond that, Dr. Cook, during his interview, mentioned text-to-tip, and I think that's a great program that I would like to see brought here. And that's when students can alert that a student needs help or there's an imminent threat of danger. And I think young adults should have access, not on their person necessarily, but where they could get to it quickly if they needed to.
Yeah, I'm good with that. And I do remember that text-to-tip. That was a really good idea. But teachers are going to have cell phones. Classrooms have cell phones. And I've been through a lot of emergencies in all of my years. And we have survived without cell phones. I don't remember anyone ever getting killed or permanently disabled. Just saying.
Okay, so we need to re-motion. So the motion would be to approve.
We had a motion on the table to approve as presented.
Right.
We need to vote on that one.
Okay. So we.
Now amended.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve as presented. Before we can approve the edit we just talked about, we would have to.
Can't you just withdraw your primary motion?
Withdraw and restate the motion by the motion maker, which is Canberra.
She's not going to do that.
I don't know what, but
You could just withdraw your motion.
No, I think they're fine to have them on their persons. We're talking about high school students. Some of them are 18 years old. They need to, I don't know.
in a lot of jobs these 18-year-olds are going to get, they can't have them.
Right, and they need to learn digital citizenship. They need to learn that you can have it on you and you don't take it out.
Can you turn your mic on, please?
You're right, but they need to learn that they can have it on them and not have it out. They're young adults. We need to treat them like young adults. And the problem doesn't lie in the policy and the procedure. The problem lies in the enforcement. So I'm not on board with them not having it on their persons, especially at the high school level.
So we should have a vote on that.
So I don't know what you guys want me to say, but there you go.
May I add a comment? In the procedures, I know there were some differences based on level. And so if you look back at the procedures, I think it was on page 97, we had off the person for elementary, and then we just said out of sight for middle school and high school, trying to accommodate, those older kids. And also, just to let you know, we do have some kids that have medical conditions, and it's important that they have the cell phone on them. Otherwise, the teacher will have to monitor blood sugar and things like that. So we tried to delineate the age within the procedures. So I don't know if that helps your discussion or not, but I thought I would point that out.
But that's included on page 98, exception for documented accommodation, right? I mean,
Correct, but
kid has a medical problem, then they would have an exception to the policy, all right?
well, except for if you say procedures has to be in line with policy. So if you say off the person, we can't violate that piece in the procedure. So we have to be consistent because policy really stands.
Really? So
Does
by
that make
policy,
sense?
you can break accommodations? I don't think so, right?
No, you
have to
can't,
accommodate.
but it doesn't make sense to write a procedure that violates our policy. So they need to flow together.
So, you
So
would,
that's why we have in here out of sight, and then we have further clarification where it's stricter within the procedure.
And I guess now that I'm rethinking this, sorry, if the cell phone's turned off, it's not vibrating, so there's no opportunity for it to distract the student, correct? I guess.
how is if the cell phone's turned off not the same problem? If a student's using a cell phone to monitor their blood sugar and it's turned off, it's not monitoring their blood sugar.
So if a student is using the phone for an app, it will be on. Correct. And they could have the volume down. But if other students that aren't using the app for a medical condition have their phone off, it shouldn't ring.
Couldn't that just be in the policy then? We add a sentence. I mean, if you're saying you want the procedure consistent with the policy, fine. So let's add a sentence in the policy about exception for medical. This is not applied to kids with documented medical problems or something along those lines.
Yep. And then I just wanted to add, when you were talking about not wanting the teachers to need to be policing the on your body, and if it has to be in the backpack, then you're right back to the same situation where if they see it on their person, then they have to stop and talk to them about it.
Wouldn't the teacher know? This doesn't make any sense. Wouldn't the teacher know kids that have medical exceptions?
Not necessarily, especially if they're not their student. Only the staff that needs to know for a student with a 504 or an IEP are aware of the medical condition. So other staff in the building would not necessarily be aware and would then perhaps be interacting with students to comment on their cell phone.
Comment on it, the kid says, I have permission, and shows them that that's documented, and that's the end of that.
But teachers should be aware.
504 on them.
And it's on Skyward. It's on.
Only the teachers who are directly responsible for them. But what I was just talking about, you had spoken earlier about a teacher commenting on a student who had their cell phone in their back pocket. And if you go back to the policy being they can't have it on their person, then that's going to put teachers back in that situation of needing to talk to students about things that they see on their clothing that appear to be cell phones.
I think once the policy has been established and is enforced over a period of time, those problems will disappear.
I guess I probably had a low blood sugar lapse, but I hadn't really been thinking about the process that the phone's dialed off. And so the phone won't be on buzz, they won't be getting vibrates, they're getting texts, the phone will be off. And I think it might actually be easier to enforce because then the teacher will know that the phone's not turned off and we can start following our procedures as far as, discipline.
Okay, why don't we vote for the motion we have? If it passes, we'll move on. If it doesn't pass, then we can look at rewording it or just move on without action. So the motion was to approve as presented. It was moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Vote a nay.
Nay.
Nay. So does someone want to make a motion?
Okay. My motion is, and we change the wording in the last sentence that, as discussed earlier, this devices should be powered off and off the person in a classroom setting unless use is authorized by school staff for specific educational purposes. And I would add something along the lines of, maybe it should be that
Accommodations will be, medical accommodations. will be
medical
allowed.
accommodations will be made as an exception to this policy or something along those lines. Does that make sense, Lynn? Medical accommodations will be allowed.
We're going to have to identify what a medical condition is.
Yeah, so basically, the type of terminology you'd be looking at is assistive technology support that is an accommodation that's been determined as a need by the IEP or 504 team, which may be medical or other.
Is that the wording? You're saying that
The
we're looking at, yeah.
assistive technology that has been deemed to be a necessary accommodation by the 504 or IEP team.
Okay, that wording sounds. That wording sounds good to me. What page was that?
So are we going to be adding hall monitors for checking cell phones in back pockets?
So if you look on your page 98 of the packet where we had the procedures, there's some language 3/4 of the way down that says exception for documented accommodation. That would give you some language that may help you if you want to add something like that to the policy.
I wonder why off isn't off. Why isn't that enough that they're turning their cell phones off? We are writing a policy that is changing what is happening now. They're off during passing, they're only allowed during lunch. I agree with Tambra. I think we're not logically thinking right now about the work that we're asking of our district administration, principals, teachers, to now be policing pockets for cell phones that are already turned off.
A couple of things on the hall monitor. First, the policy would say in the classroom setting, doesn't address the hallway.
It says in passing.
No passing, only.
That's in the procedure. The policy says.
But the policy's got to align with procedure, so we're going to have a difficult time crossing it over.
No. The procedure says they can't be used in the hallway. The policy doesn't say they can't be in back pockets in the hallway.
Right, but why would you go get your cell phone out of your locker to put in your back pocket and passing? It has to be off. So I shouldn't say hallway. So we're going to have a check when they walk in the classroom, and the teacher's going to look them up and down for a cell phone. I think we're making this really onerous on district.
I would find to add the wording that was suggested here on this, that's in the procedure, but that would fit into the policy. Students with disabilities who have documented accommodation stated on their 501 or 504 or IEP may be allowed to possess a PED for specific purposes as listed in their plans. I think that's a good addition to the that first paragraph there.
And I think regardless, that would need to be added if what Dr. Cottle suggested is that policy and procedure need to align. That sentence needs to be added either way.
Well,
because powered off, those kids need their devices powered on if they have a 504 accommodation.
Okay, so we added to the policy, and it's reflected also in the procedure, right?
Okay. So Tom's made a motion. We've kind of got out of line on this a little bit. Is there a second? I'm sorry, we can't take comment from the audience.
Second.
Thank you. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Okay. I'm sorry we can't come to agreement on that, but it is what it is. Okay. Ms. May, do you have a committee report for long-range planning?
I'd like to say the long-range planning had an outstanding meeting this last month. They're moving towards, instead of getting away from phase 2, future needs, and so to do that, they've invited elementary principals to come give reports on facilities. We're going to look to see if we can get some city planners to start attending our meetings. And they may not give a formal presentation in May, depending on how much work we get done, but they'll really be looking towards next year and giving us a future needs presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Tamara, we already heard from Math. All right. Upcoming dates on March 9th will be the Data Summit 3.0, which Dr. Olson addressed earlier, and then probably March 19th we'll have a workshop. Okay. If there's nothing further, meeting adjourned.